Hello everyone. Today's video we're going to be taking a look at how to fly the Airtalia G91. Now when you first look at this airplane, your brain goes, hey, it's a saber dog. And honestly, if you think about it like a saber dog, you're probably in good shape. Unfortunately, we do not have the radar. And for anybody who's curious where we're currently located, we're sitting here in beautiful Amendola. Falcon fans, especially the ones who did the Allied Force campaign, can tell you all about that particular location, because I'm sure you've taken off from there a few times. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, this is a pay-away aircraft. It's not too bad. SimSkunk Works put this one together. If you've ever flown this one in VR, it's a lot of fun too, because it's pretty darn fast for its size. Unfortunately for us, some of the systems are not as far as great amounts of detail go, but for the most part, it's a fun thing to fly, and I like to kind of take it for spins because, you know, it's a little bit less complex than some of the other aircraft. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, we need to go ahead and seal our canopy, which is going to be the switch right here. In the old days, of course, you needed to seal it manually. There's no automatic button for it. By the way, if you're curious what this is, you can look at this in order for the purposes of identifying where you are in a formation or what angle you're traveling at. Again, it's one of those little VR details everybody misses. It's kind of cool. All right, next thing what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and now swing on down here. Go ahead and confirm that our anti-collision light is in the on position. This thing starts up pretty darn fast. We're also going to go ahead and flip on our oxygen switch, which is going to be right down here. Obviously, we want to make sure this is the normal. Normal, we don't want to be 100%. We're going to chew through our oxygen in just a few minutes. We're going to confirm that our throttle is all the way back in behind this little slot right here. This is one of those fancy throttles that goes clink and pops out. The interesting thing is nothing happens until you actually start it, so don't panic on that one too much. Before, of course, I'm going to take a look real quickly at our fuel system, and we're going to go ahead and shut off the fuel valve right there, or turn on the fuel valve, I should say. The starter guard has been covered. I'm going to go ahead and uncover that one real quickly, and we're going to need a minute, but we'll go ahead and take a look through everything else, just securing to make sure everything is the way we want it. Now, this aircraft has a couple little quirks that we're going to have to kind of keep in mind if we want to be successful with it. The first one of these quirks is the fact that it comes with its own configurator. So inside of the main folder that you get with this one, if you were to actually come up to your data folder and go to G91 setup, you're going to get this little screen here that gives you the ability to select how much fuel you're carrying, as well as what type of payload you're carrying. Now, I played with this quite a bit, and some of the stuff is kind of nice, but honestly, I'm going to skip out anything as far as, you know, the explosives and stuff like that go. But you do have the ability to actually surf through and, you know, attach HVARs and stuff like that. So if I were to actually go over here and now press apply now, you can see I load myself up with a bunch of rockets. If I want to get myself a couple 520-pound tanks, in this case, I need two 260s. I can go ahead and press that button right now. We can even change our internal fuel. I'm also going to change our inner fuel wings right here. And again, depending on what style you want, what kind of flight you're doing, you can go ahead and apply everything. I'm going to go ahead and reset it real fast. Go ahead and set that up to what we need it to be. Press apply now, and whoosh, now we've got ourselves a couple extra external fuel tanks. We also have mostly fuel tanks on the inside. Hate it when it does that. 9999, 9999. We'll do it the old-fashioned trick. Apply now. Hey, there we go. That's the way I wanted it. Another thing you want to keep in mind with this little configurator is if you have any intention in the universe to going ahead and setting an active PHY file, this is the time to do that. So the PHY files are basically going to be defining where we're going using the Doppler navigation set. So I'm going to go ahead and press this one open. I'm going to press yes. I'm going to go to the default and double click, and now we've loaded the PHY file that we're going to need a little bit later on so that we have the ability to go ahead and set these things up differently. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and pop inside, and everything is ready to go as far as start. Let's go ahead and grab our checklist real quickly, make sure everything is looking pretty good here, and we'll go ahead and zip right through it. So first things first, we need to make sure the parking brake is set, which it is. We're going to make sure the battery is switched on, which is going to be this switch over here. I'm just going to go pop that one on to existence. We need to make sure the generators are turned on, which is going to be the switch right here. We have two sets of inverters here. Again, inverters are going to be converting the DC electricity into AC electricity, which we're going to need in order to run some of our systems. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick little check of the fire. We got a little fire warning there, but again, nothing's working yet, so I'm not worried about that too much. Warning lights, naturally, we're going to have plenty of these, depending on what's kind of going on here. This one we'll deal with a little later on. We're not going to worry about the hydraulic system just yet. Swinging over to this side, we're going to go ahead and pop this sucker on. Keep in mind, if you intend to use external fuel tanks, normally we'd be hitting this switch, but we're not going to worry about that today. We are going to turn our fuel booster pump on, and we are going to turn in our ignition. This is very, very important that we do this. Down here, we have a little jet pipe temperature warning. We're going to flip that to the on position. We're going to go lift up the starter guard, and we're going to look around to make sure when we start this thing, we're only going to inhale 4 or 5 people rather than the usual 6 or 7. All right, that looks pretty good. Starting this thing is quite the breeze. We're simply going to press and hold on the start button, and once it starts going, we're just going to push our normal throttle forward just a tiny bit. I'm going to go ahead and press it and hold the start button. You're going to get a light that's going to come out. The needle's going to start climbing up. Nice and jerky. I really appreciate that. We're just going to just snap it out of that position. All I did is push my throttle just a tiny bit forward, and the engine will start starting itself up on its own. Now, this is a loud airplane. Oh, yeah. All right, let's pop back inside. Nice. Okay, so the engine's going to go ahead and spool itself up automatically. It's going to go all the way up to its kind of idle RPM, which is about 40% here. Now it's time to go ahead and get some kind of cleanup items. First thing we want to do is we want to flip on our elevator servo. We're going to confirm that that works. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. That is the world's most responsive elevator. Unbelievable. If we were using ADF navigation, we'd be coming down here and getting this all set up. This one's a little weird because you have to turn it on first, which makes sense. Now, if I wanted to change the normal frequency, I'd do this. But if I wanted to change the decimal, I'd click left. And then I go ahead and do it. If I middle left click it, again, it gives you the ability to go ahead and do that as well. So again, if I wanted, let's say 214.0, I can click that. Now I can use this to change the tens. It takes a little bit to kind of get used to, but it's not too bad. We're going to not be playing with this one. Nope. I love that. We're not going to be playing with this too much today. All right, so all of our warning lights are out, which means we're now good to taxi. We're going to set our flaps to the correct taxi position, which is going to be 50%. You have a lot of notches. What's a notch? We have a lot of notches of flaps on this particular aircraft. We also have a speed brake, which we can, of course, extend. It's always a good idea to do it. But before we do that, we're going to make sure our PHY system is set up. So what this basically does is gives us the ability to navigate using a simpler old-school Doppler navigation system. Basically, a combination of this element here, this element down here, and this element here. What we can actually do is define latitude and longitude points in the world, and then we can actually go to those points. Now, if I were to open up one of those files real quick, let me go ahead and switch modes real fast. Files. We have this default one. I'll go ahead and open up a copy of Notepad real fast. Come down here, drag this one onto here, and now this walks you through how you can set them up. So these are all your stations. This is the name of the stations, and this is the latitude and longitude of those individual stations. Since we're in Amendola down here and basically the eastern coast of Italy, we know that we're in the right spot as far as PHY stations goes if we are able to identify them. So go ahead and close that out real quick. We don't need that. So what I'm going to do real quickly is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to play with this little knob here until I see this number makes sense. So I'll go ahead and click it once, nothing happened, click it again, nothing happened, click it again, nothing seems to happen. So come down here, I'll switch this to PHY 1, go ahead and give it a couple more tries, and now see if it's going, there it goes, bingo. So now what we've done is we've selected that particular flight plan for the purposes of flying. So this is going to be my first waypoint, second waypoint, third waypoint, fourth, and my fifth waypoint. So now if I wanted to, let's say I want to travel to waypoint 4, I can click on this button and it will go ahead and point a little needle at where that particular location is. Think of it as a very, very poor man's unadjustable GPS. It works pretty well though. Okay, now that that's all done, let's go ahead and get ourselves to our destination here. I'm going to go ahead and release my parking brake. Give this thing a little bit of thrust. It does not take much to get this thing rolling, and I'm just going to go ahead and return it. This one has the most sensitive nose wheel I think I've ever experienced, and the shocks on this thing are tremendously good. Let's go ahead and give us a little bit of thrust here as we sort of slowly make our way around all these vehicles that seem to have come by for a little party here today. Looking pretty good. How you guys doing? Wow, this thing just wants to accelerate. Now, the interesting thing is thrust to weight. This is very, very similar to an F-86. It might be slightly heavier of an aircraft, but it actually has a pretty considerable amount of thrust. All right, we're just going to kind of sneak in here. You can see I got my 2 external fuel tanks dangling off the bottom there. Again, we picked that up from a little configurator. Taking a look at that TBM. He's just sort of chilling. There's nobody flying it today, I guess. I'm not going to worry about it too much. All right, let's kind of swing down this way. And we're going to run over some lights, but what are you doing? We're going to run over some lights, which always happens. How you doing there? Those things are like $5,000 or $6,000 each. It's ridiculous. All right, go ahead and line ourselves up at the end of the runway here. All right, come to a slow down. We got no special transponder IFF on this thing, so we don't have to worry about that. We're going to confirm nobody's on the approach, which looks pretty good today. Flip on our landing light, which is going to be the switch right here. And we're just going to kind of choo-choo right onto the runway. Takeoff on this thing is pretty straightforward. Because we have that external fuel tank, this aircraft is not going to want to get airborne at all. It's not a problem. I don't have to worry about it too much. But the fact of the matter is it will take us a little while to get going. You know, these early airplanes had dirt sniffers attached to the landing gear, and they wouldn't actually let you go up until they detected dirt. Let's go ahead and smoothly push the throttle forward. Again, in the old days, you ran the problem of a surge and thrust and all sorts of nastiness. Let it kind of pick up a little bit of speed, then we'll go ahead and push it the rest of the way forward. And it sounds kind of like an angry drumming noise to me. All right, now we're basically going to tear down this runway. A little bit of rudder. We got a nasty crosswind. This is real-world weather, by the way, today, in case you're curious. Making a visual confirmation of everything looks okay real quick. Nice. All right, you're going to start hearing a lot of wheel noise. When you start hearing wheel noise, that means you're getting close to the lift up the nose point. It's about 150 knots. We're just going to lift the nose up just a tiny bit. Whoa. And And we're just going to hold it there. And what's going to happen is the aircraft is going to suddenly unstick once it gets to its appropriate speed, which is going to be about 190 knots. Once we're airborne and guarantee that there's plenty of runway not up behind us, we're going to go ahead and lift up the landing gear. All right, now that the landing gear are out of the way, we're now going to smoothly raise up the flaps. We don't want to just rip them up at full speed. Again, we can confirm that by looking down there. I'll bring up the next notch. And I'll bring up the final notch of flaps. And we are now on our way. Now, the manual that we got for this one didn't give us any specifics as far as limitations, as far as climbing or anything along those lines goes. So I'm just going to go ahead and use full thrust here, and we're just going to slowly climb at the same time. So initially, we want to be climbing at about 250 knots. That's simply an international limitation. That's not an aircraft limitation by any means. If you want to bring this thing up to 500 knots and do a zip climb, knock yourself out. But in general, we're just going to trim it out nice and gently for about 250 knots until we cross about 10,000 feet. Then we can kind of nose over and get this thing going. I have managed to get this thing supersonic in a dive. I don't necessarily recommend that, but you certainly can if you choose to do so. All right, this aircraft is beautifully trimmed out. We're climbing up nicely. Like I said, about 250 knots is pretty good. You can tell by our phi indicator here that we're positioned directly to where we're going. We're going to go ahead and flip off the landing light. We don't want to damage that thing if we don't have to. And everything is looking pretty good. We've got about 156 nautical miles to get to our destination. I'm going to go ahead and bring us to the right just a little bit. The controls on this thing are insanely sensitive, which is something I actually appreciate. Now, one thing you could do during flight, if you're ever curious, is you've got this little switch right here. If you push that button on, you go ahead and activate your collector tank, which is, I always kind of think of it kind of like a service tank that you have like in a helicopter. This tells you just kind of what's chilling inside of it. It's always kind of fun to check out. All right, enjoying a little climb out here. Doing a pretty good one. I'm really, really impressed with just how fast this aircraft is for its age. All right, we're going to bring ourselves over to the right a little bit. We're getting a little slow. Again, the trim on this is spectacularly slow, which makes it really, 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 really easy to control. We're going to be playing with this handle in a little while, but we'll, of course, burn all the fuel out of that tank first. So as far as cruise altitudes goes, if you treat this thing basically like a miniature personal jet, you probably got the right idea. You could take this thing up 36, 38,000 without too much a heart attack or issue as far as that goes. One thing you do want to keep in mind, though, is if we do go up that high, it takes a lot longer to get down. But we do have speed brakes if we want to do it in a hurry, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and continue climbing. We just passed. We're going to get through, looks like about 10,000 feet now. Although for some reason this needle isn't properly lined up. That's okay. So we're going to go ahead and nose over just a little bit to go ahead and pick up a little bit more speed for a climb here. Now there's a bunch of different speeds you can climb at. Generally somewhere around Mach 0.8 or Mach 0.75 is kind of get you up, going up about as fast as can. If you want to, another way to think about it is to basically set yourself to 270 knots and leave it at 270 knots until you get to your desired altitude. Either one of those methods is perfectly fine, and it's going to get you going up pretty fast. Just remember, don't do past 250 until you cross the 10,000 foot mark. You can see we're doing a Mach 0.6 right now, pretty effortlessly. This thing likes to climb. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to skip time a little bit until we get up to our cruise altitude. All right, we're just about up to our cruise altitude of 32,000 feet. Looking at the phi indicator, and it looks like we have about 112 nautical miles to go to our destination, which, of course, if you take a 32 times 3, that's going to be 96. So unfortunately, we spent so much time climbing with this aircraft that we really didn't get enough time to really be cruising with the aircraft. Generally, the same rule for airliners applies to aircraft like this as well. You want to take your altitude, and you want to go ahead and take the first two numbers times 3, and that's what distance you need to start descending to get into the area at basically an 1,800 feet per minute descent rate. Keep in mind, we are a military aircraft, and if we need to go a little bit faster than that, that is certainly our prerogative. All right, we are now at our cruise altitude. I'm going to go ahead and back the throttle back just a little bit. Now, one of the interesting things with this aircraft is the controls get kind of, I guess the word I'm going to use is stiff when you get up to this altitude, which actually makes it much simpler to go ahead and hold it at the specific altitude. But unfortunately, it's like, control forces in order to get this thing to behave. Again, I'm just using my phi indicator, using my vertical speed indicator kind of in unison there to go ahead and get everything pretty set up. So I've got my throttle set to about an 87%. Seems to be a pretty good. Come on, there he goes. Like I said, the controls get very strong, hard to move at the speed. I don't know if that's a design feature or something that I missed. All right, looks pretty good. So now we're cruising. Now we're looking for 96 nautical miles, and then we'll start making our way back on down towards the ground there. We're getting a cruise speed of, looks like Mach 0.8, which is actually really good for an aircraft of this age. And again, we can go a little bit faster if we want to jam that throttle forward, but that's not necessarily something we want to do. Let's go ahead and get the nice dramatic picture here. Again, Italy seems to be absolutely covered in clouds today. Like I said, I'm using real-time, real-world weather here. So this is the hand we've been dealt, so to speak. This thing is always kind of fun in VR to sort of finesse. By the way, if you're interested in turning on the sight, there's a little switch right here. You can go and turn on the gun sight. You can even adjust the depression. The poor people in VR, that sight is not collimated. So if you do one of these things with your head and you kind of move it around or something like that, it's not going to move with you. It's just going to be stuck to the glass, which is kind of sad. But, you know, you do what you got to do kind of a thing. All right, we're about 98 nautical miles away from our destination. Again, we're just using the phi indicator, which is this little needle right here. Keep that thing nice and centered, and it should take us right to where we're trying to go. Lost a little tiny bit of altitude, but like I said, you'll see what I mean when you try this one yourself as well. Landing this thing, fortunately, is a breeze, as you'll see once we get there. That being said, I'll probably bounce it when I land it, because, you know, that's how I am. All right, I'm kind of drifting a little bit. That's 96 nautical miles. Time to go down. Going down is super simple. I'm just going to take the throttle. I'm going to back it up just a tiny bit. I'm just going to push the nose over and get us going down at about 2,000 feet per minute. It's going to be a nice, smooth descent rate. Again, you have to play with it just a tiny bit to kind of find the balance between the speed that you want it to be, as well as kind of dealing with any sort of speed restrictions or anything like that. So we'll go ahead and see you guys again when we hit to 10,000 feet. On our way down, I happen to notice that our fuel indicator is starting to indicate that it is going down. That means that we have burnt all the fuel that we have in our external tanks that we were carrying a little bit earlier. So I'm actually going to jettison those tanks. To do that, we simply right-click once, and we go ahead and give this thing a little piece, which should give us the ability, come on, go ahead and pop that sucker off. Sometimes this thing can be a little bit tricky to go ahead and grab. Come on, you can do it, and I'll play with it some more. There we go. Ka-junk. And goodbye to our external fuel tanks. We never really needed them to begin with. All right, we're crossing just about 10,000 feet now. We're going to go ahead and reduce some speed real quickly. We want to go ahead and do this nice and smoothly, so I'm just going to back the throttle at just a little bit. This aircraft slows down pretty darn fast, so I'm not too worried about it. Again, we want to make sure we're getting a little less speed as we're crossing that magical point. Yeah, looking pretty good right there. As we cross 10,000 feet, we want to go ahead and flip on our landing lights, just as kind of a little convenience measure for everybody around us, so they kind of have a heads up that we're basically about to land this sucker. Obviously, that helps with visibility as well. I'm going to swing down this way. Looks like about 28 nautical miles. And we did get rid of those external tanks, and for the life of me, I can't remember how to get this thing back in, so I'm just going to leave it kind of hanging out. I'm sure there's another button I could have pushed, but this is the fun one to pull. And you can see, not carrying anything. All right, so I got about 2,600 pounds of fuel left, which is going to be plenty. There's 10,000 feet. We're going a little fast. That was my bad for not paying attention. Go ahead and bring on the landing lights. Looks pretty good. Pull out the speed brakes for just a moment. They work nice. Whew, those speed brakes are aggressive. All right, about 250 knots, and now it's just a matter of putting this thing down on the ground. All right, see you when we get to the airport. All right, our destination is right at 12 o'clock there. So it's time to start getting this thing ready to slow down and kind of bring it in for a landing. Now, our wind today is basically going to be coming directly off of our left. So we're going to go ahead and enter into a right mid field here. This is going to be a right-left traffic pattern. There we go. I knew I'd get it. So one of the problems with this aircraft is as you start to slow down, it becomes kind of hard to see. So I always recommend if you have a button bound to that little thing on the side of your keyboard that can go ahead and stick your head up, it will make your life a lot simpler. This is very true, of course, with warbird aircraft as well. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to kind of head out to sea and then go ahead and bring ourselves around into a pretty standard pattern. Now this aircraft can get very slow if you need to get this thing slow. That being said, we're fairly heavy still. We're carrying almost our full entire regular tank. What they usually say it's 160 knots plus 500 times 5 for every extra weight that you are carrying. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and bring myself into my little downwind here. We're going to lose a lot of speed in this turn, which is very desirable because we do want to slow this thing down a little bit. All right, that's pretty good right there. Hold the nose up a little bit. And there is our runway that we're going to. Looks like we are a little bit too parallel, and I keep pressing the wrong button because I have it backwards in DCS. There we go. Okay. Level ourselves off a little bit here. There we are. All right, let's start bringing this thing on down. It looks pretty abeam to me, so I'm going to pull the nose back. Landing gear can come down basically right once you get under 200 knots if you need to help slow down. Remember, we've got those lovely speed brakes that'll help pull you down to speed very quickly. We can go ahead and start bringing the flaps in just a second. There we go. Ooh. Start bringing those flaps down. We're going to get back to about 50% before our final. There we are. Hold that nose up just a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and take our base turn here. Oh boy, and get to our approach speed of about 160 knots. Well, that was weird. So apparently you have to be careful not to accidentally stand on the trim button when you're coming in for a landing. Who knew? All right, let's try that again without dying horribly this time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do the same thing we did before. This time we're going to be a little more careful. That looks good. Go ahead and get our flaps set to the correct position. Make sure everything's all set here. Again, like I said, the controls are unusually stiff for this particular aircraft. All right, bring it down to about half flaps. We're going to go ahead and start a nice, neat descent this time with a little less dying. It's always fun watching things goof up like that. Now, the interesting thing is when I was practicing this, I didn't have that issue. I guess I just put my hand in the wrong spot at the wrong time kind of a thing. But, man, was that a bummer. Man, was that a bummer. All right, we're going to keep our speed up a little bit faster this time as we come in for our little approach here, now that I got the trim set correctly. That was kind of funny. All right, coming on down.
Red 6-4, please acknowledge.
There we go. Of course, we need to set this to the correct destination. Hey, it worked. Nice. Now we're just going to go ahead and get ourselves nice and to beam the numbers, which looks pretty good right there. Bring the nose around. Again, we're trying to keep our speed up a little bit higher this time. All right, I've got my hand on the correct trim button. Just had to leave that one in because I thought that would have been funny for you guys. All right, we're going to keep our speed about 170. I'm going to start bringing a little bit more throttle into this as we're coming around this corner. Again, in case I hit the wrong button again. That was funny. All right, we're going to go ahead and bring in our last couple notches of flaps in just a minute as we start swinging around for our final approach here. All right, let's go bring ourselves over to final. Off we go. Now we get a bit of an optical illusion when we do our normal approach here. I'm just kind of lining everything up. Speed's good. We're going to go and bring in the last bit of our flaps here, and we're going for about 160 knots. And make sure your hand is not on the trim button when you do this approach, please. Pretty good. A little slow, a little slow. Hold the nose correctly. Let's see, there's about 160 right there. Alrighty then. So when we approach with this particular aircraft, like I said, you want to land back wheels first. One thing you don't want to go reaching for right away is going to be the brakes. If you do so, you're going to go thunk with your nose. If you start to feel this kind of thing happening, just go ahead and bring in a lot of throttle. This aircraft has a lot of drag. And you'll see exactly what I mean when you try to approach it for the first time. All right, there's about 160 knots right there. I'm looking out the window here. It looks pretty good. All right, we got about the correct altitude now. I'm going to go ahead and use my normal mode of doing this. There we go. There we go. About 160 knots. I'm getting a little high, but that's all right. I need exactly this head position. There we go. All right, keep your hand on that throttle, though. Flaps all the way down, gears all the way down. Speed brakes are retracted. Speed's still about 160. When this thing stops flying, it stops flying. You have to be ready for it. See how it's starting to sink? Starting to sink? This is the strangest flight model ever. I wonder if it's something that Microsoft had changed. All right, now we're over the end of the runway. We're going to smoothly reduce the throttle. Smoothly. And we are down. Ooh, oofta. Told you I'd bounce it. All right, we're going to go and bring in our speed brakes. We're going to go and activate our drag chute, which is a great way to get slowing down in a hurry. I haven't even touched my brakes yet. All right, retract our drag chute, and we are now safely on the ground as opposed to, sitting inside the Adriatic Sea over there. All right, hopefully this video is helpful as far as seeing how to fly this plane. Key thing there is these are massively draggy, so when you do deploy them, don't be surprised if they suddenly knock you out of the air. And obviously, have a fun time trying to approach this thing with any sort of real weight of fuel. I'm carrying basically full load here. If we were a little bit lighter, that would have been a lot easier. Enjoy.